Um, there are a few amazing things that have come from this pandemic. Few horrible things. First off, the fact that it's happening in the middle of August and it is 1,000 degrees, so I'm taking this off. But there's a couple things, really good things in my opinion, that have happened from the pandemic. First off is that we have spent the last 5 months now trying to figure out how to do church in new ways. So we've done online, we've done in person. Some churches are doing, I saw this morning, one church is doing a drive-up service, so their preacher was outside. And Philip, if you're watching this, I'm praying for you because it looked like it was about hotter there than it is here. But I've seen churches doing online services, drive-up services, outdoor services. Let's see, what other ones have I seen? Of course, the in-home, just everybody try to worship at home as best you can. We did kind of a mixture of the two. But the beauty that I can see of it is that, we used to, in January 2020, every member of the body of Christ had an idea of what church looked like, right? You walk in, you sit down, you have this many prayers, you have this many songs, you have this, do. Everything is lined up perfectly. And, if you read the New Testament, you get this idea, especially given 1 Corinthians 11, really first 12 through 14, 1 Corinthians, you get this idea that their worship services were a lot more fluid than ours used to be. And now, we're used to all sorts of different things happening in worship. So I'm perfectly fine with cutting a song out here and there if we need to. But it's good to be back in person, especially given the fact that that we have so many that are dealing with the virus now. It's good to be together so that we can pray for them and so forth. Like I said, we're going to study John chapter 1. We read verses 43 through the end of the chapter because that's the main focus of what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about inviting people to meet Jesus, but what I want to do is back up real quick and read chapter 1, verse 35. The next day, again, John was standing with his 2 disciples, and he looked at Jesus as he walked by and said, "Behold, the Lamb of God." The 2 disciples heard him say this. They followed Jesus. Jesus turned and saw them following and said to them, "What are you seeking?" And they said to him, "Rabbi," which means teacher, "where are you staying?" And he said to them, "Come and you will see." So they came and saw where he was staying, and they stayed with him that day, for it was about the 10th hour. So their days started at 6 a.m., so this is about 4 p.m., okay? So it's about the 10th hour. One of the 2, who heard John speak and followed Jesus was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first found his own brother Simon, who said to him, "Now this is Peter, we have found the Messiah," which means Christ. And so Simon Peter's brother named Andrew goes and finds Peter. That statement in verse 41, "we have found the Messiah," which means the Christ, is the statement that was mentioned to a man who would then become the Apostle Peter, who is, of course, we know, so influential in the New Testament. He brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said to him, "You are Simon, the son of John. You shall be called Cephas," which means Peter. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now, Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael, said to him, "We have found him of whom Moses and the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Philip said to him, "Come and see." So far in this, we have a man, who has met Jesus, a disciple of John, who has met Jesus and gone and told his brother named Peter. Now, we don't really have any instance to really think that Simon Peter, was a follower of John at that point, but maybe he was. Then they go to another city, goes to Galilee. He finds a guy that's from the same city as the 2 guys that he met the day before, named Philip. Philip goes and tells his brother. And his brother says a statement that if it were said today, it would be considered pretty controversial. If Nathaniel had said that statement in 2020, he would have fallen victim to what we call the cancel culture. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? That's a pretty unkempt way of saying Nazareth is not a very good city. And so Nathaniel says to him, "How do you know me?" Jesus has announced to him, or rather recognized him. Jesus said, "I saw you before when you were under the fig tree." And Nathaniel realizes that, hold on a second, no one knew that I was under the fig tree, so this must be very special. So he goes ahead and he understands that this person that his brother has announced to him and introduced him to is actually who his brother said he was. So verse 50, Jesus answered him, "Because I said I saw you under the fig tree, you believe? You will see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." So that's our text for this morning. I went and I tried to find a couple, since this passage is all about invitation to meet Jesus, I went and I tried to find a couple of statistics. And the statistics are pretty old, and given the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic, I don't know how reliable statistics are anymore, because someone asked me the other day, what happens when this happens? And I said, listen, most churches haven't had worship services in 5 months. There's no telling what's going to happen. We just don't know. All of the old way of doing things and the way that people usually react and so forth are completely different. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but have you watched a TV show in the last, say, month and a half, since the mask thing has become really, really prevalent, and you see people walking down the street without masks on and you get a little bit of anxiety? Have you ever done that? We were watching a show the other night, and it's all these friends that come in to one room, and they've been all over the city for the whole day. And then they come in, and they're sitting right next to each other on a couch. And I looked at Rebecca and said, I think I might have PTSD, because I really got nervous when they sat next to each other on that couch. So people are going to act different nowadays than they used to. We understand that. But here's some statistics that I think would probably cross over and maybe even go even more so. Okay, so you ready? 95% of Christians, when this survey was taken, which was a few years ago, 95% of Christians that were asked. Now these are professing Christians. These aren't, of course, what we might determine the most faithful members of the body of Christ are, but 95% of professing Christians said that they had never, not once, won a single person to Christ. 80% of Christians said that they do not consistently evangelize or share their faith. 52%, about half of them, said that they have actually shared the gospel at least once in the past year. I don't understand how 95% of people have never won a soul to Christ, and yet 52% have shared the gospel in the past. Anyways, 73% of all Christians said that they feel a personal responsibility to share their faith, and yet only 52 of them have ever done it in the past year. Less than 2% of Christians are involved in what they determined is a ministry or an evangelistic work. And yet, all of that, and yet, they surveyed non-Christians at the same time, and 53% of them said that they would gladly accept an invitation to worship services if they were offered. Now, that being said, I am going to become a prophet for just a minute. Not an actual biblical prophet, but just hear me out here. We are not going to see visitors to worship services until such a time comes that we can go to Walmart and walk through both doors. Okay? We're not going to see visitors to worship services until you can go from store to store to store to store in one day and never feel uncomfortable at all for one point. worship service visitors they're in the past. So, how is the church going to be able to effectively communicate the gospel to a world where our number one thing that we used to do is taken away? How are we going to evangelize when the one thing that everybody is comfortable with doing, hey, would you like to come to services with me? That's the easiest way, right? That's what we've all done. That's now gone. But I want you to think about, before we get back to the text, I want you to think about that there was a time in the church's history when that same instance happened. In Acts chapter 2, the Christians are available for people to talk to whenever they want. And there are passages like 1 Corinthians that talk about the miraculous gifts that indicate that they would have visitors on a regular basis. In fact, in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, he talks about the fact that some of you are standing up and you're prophesying in tongues and no one knows what you're saying. And you've got a visitor that thinks you're crazy now because they've come to worship. James talks about a person who is not a Christian comes to worship. But at the end of the New Testament, when the book of Revelation actually comes to fruition around the mid-2nd century, that goes away, right? They weren't inviting people to worship services when you had to be scared whether or not a Roman soldier was going to be at the door of the building or at the door of the catacombs when you walked out. So how did they evangelize? I believe the way they evangelized is the exact same way that Jesus did right here. First off, we need to look at verses 38 and 39. Jesus turned and saw them following him and said, "Who are you seeking?" He said to him, "Rabbi," which means teacher, "where are you staying?" He said to them, "Come and you will see." So they came and saw where he was staying, and they stayed with him that day, for it was about the 10th hour. The first thing that Jesus did when he started his ministry. Now, keep in mind that his ministry has not fully taken effect yet, because that's not really going to happen until people see his power in John chapter 2, which we'll talk about next week. But at this point, when this happens, the first thing Jesus does is go to the people who already believe in the coming Messiah and shows them exactly what they're waiting for, right? So number one, you have to see for yourself. You have to, people who already believe in Jesus, if we're going to evangelize, we have to realize that our faith is more than just what's been going on Sundays for the last 2,000 years. And I think that's another amazing benefit of what's been going on, because now there's a level of accountability when we're all meeting in the worship service and we're all meeting in the building, right? Because you don't want to miss, because then people are they might think weird things, or they might ask, "Where is so-and-so? He wasn't at church last week." And then you might get some gossip going, and that's a whole other topic that we've talked about. But you have a level of accountability. When your worship service revolves around you getting your kids to sit still on the couch for 5 minutes while you watch worship service on the TV screen, that accountability is pretty much gone. It takes some real dedication to actually have worship service when you're having worship services in your home. So I think that's one beautiful thing that's come from this. But we need to realize that if we're going to evangelize, we have to make sure that we have the faith firmly settled in our minds as well. So 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 16 says this, "Keep a close watch on yourself on the teaching. Persist in this, for by doing so you will both save yourself and your hearers." Now that's to a preacher, Timothy, but it goes to us as well. Everyone, not just preachers. Or Acts chapter 2, verse 40. "When many other words he bore witness and continued to exhort them, saying, 'Save yourselves from this crooked generation.'" There is a level of personal faith that needs to happen before you and I are willing to talk to someone about Jesus. When we're willing to invite someone, not to a worship service, but to actually have a conversation. Because that's where evangelism is really going to take place from now on. And really, it's where it should have been taking place the entire time. But anyways, Warren Wiersbe, a Bible commentator, said this: an unconverted ministry and an unconverted membership are the devil's chief weapons in opposing the work of God. And he's specifically talking about evangelism. If our membership, if we are not converted to the gospel, and we're not effectively trying to teach people the gospel, that's the best thing that he has to fight against Jesus. All right, number 2, we need to invite people that don't know that they don't know. In verses 40 through 42, Jesus goes and talks to Andrew, and then Andrew goes and talks to Simon Peter. And in this, well, let's just read it. Verse 40. One of the two who heard John speak and followed Jesus was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first found his own brother Simon and said to him, "We have found the Messiah," which means Christ. He brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, "You're Simon, the son of John," or Simon Bar Jonah. You shall be called Cephas, which means Peter. Okay, so this man, Andrew, goes and finds his brother. His brother, from every record that we can find, is not a follower of John. How is Andrew a follower of John and waiting on the Messiah, and yet his brother Peter is not? Well, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but you probably have, if you don't have siblings, you have a close family member that's not a member of the church. You may be the only member of the church in your entire family for generations and generations. When I first obeyed the gospel, none of my family had been Christians, and I thought forever. And then come to find out, my great-grandfather was an elder in a congregation in Gadsden. I had no idea about that. So there's a lot of people who have family members who aren't followers or aren't believers in the Messiah. And in this time period, of course that's going to happen because the Messiah hasn't even shown himself yet, right? There's a lot of people that just don't know what they're missing. There's 2 types of lost people in this world. There's the people that don't know that they're lost, and there's the people that don't care that they're lost. The people that don't know are broken into 2 different categories. Those that really just don't know, they don't have a clue. Now, in today's world, in America, there are not that many people that have never heard of Jesus, right? I mean, let's face it. We live in America, okay? Our entire country is founded on biblical principles. Maybe not founded by Christians, maybe not founded by followers of the actual New Testament gospel, but it's at least founded on biblical principles. So in our society, there's rarely a person who's never heard the name, but a lot of them have no idea who he actually was. If you ask them who said the Sermon on the Mount, they're going to say Billy Graham, and then they don't even know who Billy Graham is. It's just some guy that I saw on Fox News one time, and they were yelling at him. I don't know who he is. So there's a lot of people that just don't know, and sometimes people are just ignorant, and not in a bad way. That word has been come to use to benign people and just hurt people's feelings, but it's okay to be ignorant if you're willing to learn, right? I'm ignorant about a lot of things. I can change the oil in my truck. Don't ask me to change pretty much anything else because I don't know. Acts chapter 17, verse 23. Paul's on Mars Hill. He says, "For I passed along and observed the objects of your worship. I found also an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God. What you therefore worship is unknown, this I proclaim to you." And a lot of times, if Paul had lived today, he would have looked at that altar to the unknown God and he would have said, "Look, they don't even care." No, it's just they didn't know what they were missing, right? All right, number 3, and then I'll leave you with the lesson. Because like I said, you're not used to sitting in worship services again, and I'm not used to preaching again. It's going to take me a week or 2 to get back in shape, and hopefully we don't have to shut down, because I was just getting back into the roll of things, and then we had to shut back down. Anyways, we're not going to say that. Anyways, number 3, there's this second category of people that don't know, and that's the people that are questioning. You have the people that just don't know, they don't have a clue that they're missing something, and then you have the people that genuinely They're looking, but they don't know what they're looking for. That's verses 43 through 46. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now, Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We've found him of whom Moses and the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the Son of God." And Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" And Philip said, "Come and see." Now, okay, listen, we're going to put aside the horrible statement that Nathanael just said about people from Nazareth, okay? And we're just going to take his words at his words, okay? He doesn't say, "What are you talking about?" He doesn't say, "Who's the Messiah?" Philip says to Nathanael, "We found him of whom Moses and the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." Nathanael understands what he just said, and he's been waiting for the Messiah. Now, he says a statement that he shouldn't have said about a group of people that live in a certain area that he shouldn't have said, okay? We understand that. But at face value, he at least knows who he's talking about. He's been waiting, and he doesn't know that it's actually here. One of the best ways to evangelize is to just address questions that people have. And in the middle of this pandemic, a lot of people have a lot of questions. You just have to be willing to pay attention for them to ask it. And sometimes you have to kind of prod them, because they might say something. They might hint at something, and you have to have the wherewithal to actually see it. You have to train yourself to see the questions. All right, I'll leave you with this. This is a quote by a man by the name of Kurt Lewin. He said this: "A successful individual typically sets his next goal somewhat, but not too much, above his last achievement. In this way, he steadily raises his level of aspiration." Okay, the reason why I wanted to include that quote is because when I became a preacher 11 years ago, it's been 11 years and 5 months, I was convinced as soon as you give Lee Snow a Bible and a pulpit, the entire world will obey the gospel. Guess what didn't happen? Anything like that. Now, I've been blessed to teach the gospel to a couple people, and I get to teach you all every Sunday, and y'all still want to listen to me, so I guess that's a positive. But sometimes we set our goals so big, and we say, if you haven't converted 1,000 people, then you just aren't doing it. I'll tell you a story. I might have told you this story before. A friend of mine that has since fallen away from the church, and hopefully he comes back one day. One time I was at Jacksonville as a student. I was planning on going to Memphis School of Preaching, and I went to visit Mom. And so we went to church at a church that she had just obeyed the gospel. We went to a congregation that I wanted her to look at becoming a member of. And so we walk up to the front doors, and I introduce myself. "Hi, I'm Lee. I go to Jacksonville State University." And this guy, who I was just meeting at this moment, he was a short little guy, and he was standing there, and he had his suit on and his perfect tie, and I could tell something was different. And he said, "My name's D'Angelo. I am a student at Memphis School of Preaching." And we started talking because I was already planning on going to Memphis, and so we started talking. He said, "Wait a second," about 5 minutes into the conversation, "Wait a second, you said you're from where?" And I said, "Well, I'm from Arab, but I go to Jacksonville State." He said, "Jacksonville State? Are you that guy?" I said, "What are you talking about? Are you that guy? I've heard about this guy down at Jacksonville State." I said, What are you talking about?" He said, "There's this guy down there that's converted like 1,000 people." And I said, "No, you're thinking of Dalton, not me." He said, "Can you introduce me to him?" I guess. I didn't know I knew like a celebrity in the church. Okay. Not every person is going to be able to be heard of by a person who lives 6 hours away because of all the evangelism you've done. But I just want to bring you back to what I said at the very beginning. 95% of professing Christians say that they have never won a single person to Christ. Now, I understand it's not you, it's the gospel, and you're sharing the gospel, and the gospel's doing its work, and I understand that whole thing. But the reason why 95% of Christians say that they've never won a single soul to Christ is because 95% of Christians are not trying to win anyone to Christ. They are accepting. They are not going to accept an invitation to worship services for a while. That's okay. But the thing we need to remember is that they still need the gospel, whether or not they're in quarantine. So, if you need to become a Christian, or maybe you need to repent of sins, we're going to offer that. In a pandemic world, we're going to offer that a little differently. If you need to, we're going to do it old school wise. If we're going to stand and sing a song of encouragement, and if you need to respond, you just raise your hand, and then we'll address your need, okay? Instead of asking everyone to come down front and all that stuff. So let's go ahead and stand, and if you need to respond to the invitation, you're welcome to do so as we do so and sing.